Welcome to the Real Life Podcast at Hermitage Hills, where we have real honest conversations with real people about topics relevant for today. At Hermitage Hills, we desire to see people experience life change through Jesus Christ. For more information about our church and how you can be a part of the community here, visit hermitagehills.com/connect.
Hey, Rouse here. Thanks for coming back to our podcast for this issue of Real Life, where we take real people with real stories that have real impact. And I welcome today someone who's a friend and a part of our church here. Is Syndi Custodio.
Yeah.
Did I say that right?
Cool.
Cool. See, you told me I still can't get it right. Custodio.
Right.
Syndi, I'll stay with that. How about that?
Yeah.
That's awesome. But so how long have you been here at Hermitage Hills?
It's going to be 5 years, going on to 6 years.
Okay,
almost,
5
yeah.
years. 5 years, awesome. So Syndi would have all kinds of stuff to talk about. But what I asked her to come in and have a conversation with me about on Real Life is the topic of homeschooling.
Yes.
And she's been homeschooling her children. She's going to talk about that. Yeah. But we're going to talk about, how she gets started and what is she learning from your viewpoints and different things. So we're just kind of walk through that. But before we go there,
yes,
I wanted the folks who are watching or listening to the podcast to first so who is this Syndi? Tell me a little bit about your background. Who is this person I'm sharing with today?
Well, yeah, my original name is Cynthia.
Cynthia. Okay.
But everybody just called me Syndi. They would just call me Syndi, and that just stuck. Uh-huh. And so there's really no one who calls me Cynthia. Everybody calls me, except for my mom when she would get really upset. And she'd be like, Cynthia.
The whole thing came out. Then you knew.
And then I was like, I'm in trouble.
Alert.
But my parents, they immigrated from Guatemala.
Okay.
Straight to Chicago.
Right.
They met in Chicago, got married, and then, I'm here.
Uh-huh. Were you born in Chicago?
I was born in Chicago.
And how many years did you live in Chicago?
All my life.
All your life?
All my life.
Until you moved here?
Until I moved here.
Seriously?
So, yes.
5 years ago?
Yes.
Wow. So tell me about growing up in Chicago.
Yeah. So growing up in Chicago, I am legit from the inner city Chicago. So I'm not from the outskirts. I'm from Chicago. There's a place called Uptown in Chicago, about 10 minutes away from Wrigley Field. So for those who know baseball and know,
I've been there.
Lake Michigan was really close by.
Okay.
So I grew up in Uptown Chicago, and basically it was diverse. So I remember my childhood being, I'm filled with friends from all over the place, from languages, the area was filled with all different types of people, interactions and things like that. So I always genuinely loved that. And so Syndi Custodio went to a private school, grew up in a private school.
Okay.
And then
what kind of school?
It was just
private, but was it a
like
Catholic school?
It was a Montessori school.
Montessori.
So it was yeah. So it was very much, it wasn't religious, it was just a private school.
Right.
And then from there I went 1 year to a Catholic school, and some people might think that coming from a Latino background, that my family has a Catholic upbringing.
Right, I would have thought that.
Right, but that's not the case. So I don't know what being Catholic is. I was never taught that.
Okay.
None of my family members went to a Catholic church. And so, being in a Catholic school was horrible for me because I was Christian, and so I was marginalized and, and things like that. And so that was really different, because everybody assumed that I would be Catholic. Then I went to a public school, and those were the most horrible years of my life. They were. I mean,
what years was that for public school?
That was from 6th grade to 8th grade.
Okay, 6th to 8th.
Yeah, that was from 6th to 8th grade.
Which is the most difficult years, period.
It was horrible. I was bullied. I was bullied.
Oh, wow.
Just bullied, and called names for no reason.
Yeah.
And so I had two friends.
Was the school diverse?
The school, yes.
Okay.
So by that time I had moved more towards, it was, towards an area called Irving Park. So it's like Old Irving Park. So it's very diverse. So it wasn't there wasn't one more greater than the other.
Right.
It was extremely like mixed.
Right,
And
right.
so it was, and it was crazy because we were all diverse. So it wasn't an issue with race or ethnicity or anything like that. It was just an issue of being mean, you know, just being mean.
Yeah, yeah.
And so.
So ninth grade, where'd you go?
Ninth grade. So when I graduated from public school, I went to a Christian school.
At ninth grade?
Yes. I
Okay.
went to the only Christian school in urban Chicago.
What was the name?
It was called Gospel Outreach Christian High School.
Yeah.
And so we went, I went there. And that was once again full of missionary kids, missionaries that came, children from missionaries that came from other countries,
Okay.
and then missionaries kids that were stationed, like within the U.S., that were just coming or things like that, or trying to figure out what they were doing. And so it was a mishmash. We had we represented maybe I want to say like 15 different countries, like from different,
Wow.
Yeah. So it was
Exciting.
it was beautiful. It was a beautiful atmosphere. It really, I think that really catapulted me into my relationship with the Lord, my expression with the Lord. It really helped me. So it took me from this horrible experience to an experience of like, man, like I want to follow Jesus.
Right.
Yeah.
So we're going to get there.
Yep.
So don't go there yet.
No.
We're going to get there in a minute.
Yes.
So years go by,
Yeah.
and you meet a young man, I guess.
I do. So
his name?
His name is Cesar. We actually. It's a crazy story because I went off to college. I went to college, a Christian college. I returned back to the high school where I graduated from because they needed a Spanish teacher. And that is my major. My major is Spanish and Latin American Studies.
Okay.
So I came back, I returned, and I became the Spanish teacher. At the time, there was a merge between the Spanish church and the school because the school was run in the church building. And so there was a gospel outreach school and there was a gospel outreach church.
Okay.
And so the Spanish version of that was starting to build itself within the church. And so their offices were all together. I, at the time, was working in the office and I met a lovely couple. And we talked. We became really, really good friends. She would bring me lunch, and we would talk just about anything, just stuff. But never mentioned that they had like a son that was coming over. Nothing until he actually came, and so they're like, "Oh, Syndi, this is Cesar. He's our oldest son. He's coming to help with the youth ministry." And I was like, "Oh, hi!" So we became really good friends. We did lots of stuff together, merged our churches, and I had my youth group, his youth group. We worked together for the 3 years that he was here, and then they all moved back. And so I took mission trips with high schoolers from the school to Guatemala, and we would see each other. And our friendship was always like, "Oh, we're so glad to see you." And then we just kind of like, blah, 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 and then we just kind of didn't connect. And
How was that again?
And then when we finally saw each other again, of the getting to know Syndi, I used to sing in a Christian salsa group. Yes.
Oh.
so, which, if you don't know, like, Guatemalans don't sing salsa. And so it was very weird.
Yes.
But I was invited to this church, which I didn't know that he was a part of. Like, I didn't know that he was going to be there.
And where was this?
This was in Chicago.
Okay,
still,
Chicago, okay.
Always in Chicago. And so all of a sudden I turn around and I see somebody on the soundboard, and I'm like, "No way, Cesar!" And so blah, blah, blah. Long story short, everybody around it was like, "Guys, dude, man, come on." Like,
Right. Yeah.
And I think that God had worked through stuff. We had relationships prior, and so that we were just kind of like wanting to focus on the Lord.
Yeah.
After that.
Yeah.
I was doing an internship at the time, so I was like, like I'm steadfast. This
Right.
is where I'm heading.
I'm laser beam.
Right. And so he was kind of in the same mode.
Yeah.
But then once my internship was over, it was like, okay, like, what's up?
All right. So then y'all dated, got married.
Yes, got married and had kids.
How many?
We have 5.
5. See, I come from a family of 5 kids.
Yeah.
Yeah?
It's beautiful.
So I have 4 older sisters.
Awesome.
So basically I had 5 mothers
Basically.
growing up.
Yes.
That's the way it works. So But you have 5.
I have 5, 3 boys.
3 boys.
And 2 girls.
And 2 girls. Ages what to what?
15 to 5.
Woo.
Yes, exactly.
Man, full. Okay, so going to our topic today.
Yeah.
What, I think I kind of know now, what sparked your interest when you have children and now you're thinking of homeschooling? Did you start with the first one or did it come later? I don't remember.
No. So really, actually, it started pre-having kids.
Okay.
And so when we were in our premarital, preps, in our deep conversations that you have to talk about.
Sure.
The topic of what are we going to do with our kids' education? Like, what is that going to look like? Thankfully, Caesar and I both come from, like, we were both teachers. So he also was a high school teacher at the Christian school in Guatemala. And, obviously I was too. And so we both worked with youth and things like that. And both, but like, in a Christian environment, right? And so we saw the good and the bad of all of that mix. And really, when we were talking, we kind of just knew that we wanted to educate our kids like ourselves. We didn't know exactly.
So premarital counseling, you all had this conversation.
Yeah.
That's amazing, which is awesome. I think more couples need to have more conversations. We try to do that here with couples like, let's try to answer every question we can ask before you get married so you don't get down the road and go, I didn't know you thought like that. That's what we're going to do now kind of thing. That's awesome. So you so did y'all make up your mind going, we're going to.
So in that meeting with our counselors, the topic started with finance because we were like, what is our home going to look like? What is it going to be structured as? And then the topic evolved into, wait a second, hold on, like, what if we have kids? Like, which obviously we wanted to have kids. Like, then that's going to change. Like, my response is going to change to that. And so Caesar's response was like, well, yeah, my response is going to change to that because I want to be a father. And so when we both came down to it, we were just like, wait, hold on. Like, and his response to me was like, I'm going to do all that is in my power to work so that you'll be able to stay home with our kids. Okay. And so I was like, okay, I'm on board with that. Like, I will do all that is in my power to support that, that vision. And then we also talked about the fact that if at any moment something were to change, that we had to be willing to like alter it, right? And to change that. And so our counselors were like, okay, well, what happens if, right? And so that brought us into that topic. And then, we were doing urban missions. Or I was coming out of that. And then we were just kind of coming into a new season of leaving our jobs to do full-time ministry. And so both of us, had to talk about, this, what are we going to work for? Like, what is our goal as a family? And so we knew that our goal was to do missions. And we just didn't know what that was going to look like. Because we weren't even married yet. So we kind of had like a rough draft, and we were just thinking, well, as frugal as we can be, and we're gonna try to not invest into material things. Not that we weren't gonna have any, but that wasn't gonna be like, the big house with the 2 cars, with the picket fence, with the whole thing, like what was our goal, And so we talked through that, and like in that we matched, and so we knew that, what we wanted for our family to look like. We knew we didn't want to invest into what everybody thought was valuable. We wanted to invest in the kingdom, and that was going to shift. That wasn't going to look the same all the time. And so we just had to be willing to do that. And like looking back, I'm like, like had I known.
So you've homeschooled since child 1.
Yes.
Beginning.
Yes.
To date.
Yes.
With the 5-year-old.
Yes.
Coming into the deal.
Yes.
That's amazing. So let me ask you this question.
Yes.
What have been, in your experience? It may not be for everybody.
Right.
But from what you've experienced with your family, your kids, and homeschooling, what are some of the most significant pluses that you see in homeschooling?
Okay, I think obviously it's easy. It could be easy to answer. if we look at it from flowers and unicorns and rainbows and everything, right? But the reality is, like, even prior to this, I was talking to my kids about it, like my older boys. Yeah. And I was like, guys, let's see if we match.
Let's see what I think.
I have my answers, but I was, I asked them, I'm like, well, what would you say are pluses of homeschooling? Because it's easy for a parent to say, right? But for young people, it's kind of like a different answer. But, they were basically along the same lines. And it was just like, Mom, we don't have the pressures that there are in public schools. Like, we don't have the worry of what we're learning. Like, we don't have the worry and the stresses of like, ooh, is that, like where I have to challenge what is being taught to me. Right.
Well, my wife's a public school teacher. Right. And so she remembers telling her students, because of her personal conviction, she would go, I have to teach you this. Right. It's not what I believe. Right. But the curriculum is required for me to teach you this. Now, if you want to know what I believe, ask me, and I'll be glad to tell you. Right. Because if they asked, then she could. Exactly. But there is, in the material, things that you have to teach in a way that's factual, that, like, we don't think that way. So so your kids are saying, we don't have to be concerned about that. Right. No, but I'm sure you teach those things for information, so that they're not unaware. Right. You'd want them to be, but this is not factual. This is, here's a theory, here's this, here's a hypothesis. Exactly. Some think this way, and this is why. Right. But this is where we are, and this is why. That's pretty cool. So you got that flexibility. Yeah. So we have that, and so and then another one of my sons said, "Well, Mom, we also don't have like the distractions. Like, we don't have to be in a place all day." Being distracted by all this other stuff. Or
like,
waiting.
we could just,
waiting for others to catch up, waiting for others to get ready.
And we could just focus on our work and then get done with it and do other things. Like, we have the liberty to do other things.
Is it true that homeschooling students actually get the same amount of work accomplished in half the time?
Yes.
That's true?
Right. So
when you're in school all day...
Exactly.
Because you're spending a lot of your time with whatever you have to get done with 35 other people in the room. Yeah. You've got just your brothers and sisters, and you can work at your own pace, all that kind of stuff. Yeah. But if you want to get it done, then
you're done. And that's awesome. Exactly what they were saying. They were saying, like, and then my son was like, "Why don't you throw a little joke in there, Mom? We could do homework in our PJs." And I'm like, "That's right. If we can't do homework, you know what I mean?" And so it's just an ability to grow physically together, because obviously, kids are growing, and we're all growing. But it's an ability to grow together mentally. And so one of my sons said, like, that we are able to be with as a family together. Right. We're growing emotionally because, obviously with growing children, and obviously even as parents with the oldest experiencing new things, and like girls, it's boys and girls are different. And so, you grow emotionally, like you grow to understand the dance of like, oh, he's having a bad day, Mom's having a bad day, like, this is not where, and so we're growing spiritually together, right? Because we're dialoguing about these things. Christ is at the center of math, at the center of science, at the center of history, at the center of like all the things that we're doing, right? And so there's a growth spiritually, right? And so awesome. We're managing all of those things, and so those are like invaluable, I think, and then there's the aspect of just like the moral growth, like the applying of the scripture in like a setting where you have to help out, right? You have to wash the dishes for others. You have to pick up after others. It's not that you don't have that opportunity in school, because obviously, like I experienced all of it, right? The whole gamut. But it's different. It's different, especially as a parent. You don't get to be involved in that, right? You don't get to see that in action. And so those are the trade-offs, I guess, but obviously, there's different things, but those are pluses for us that we value. Yeah.
Any others?
Yes. The ability for us to consider the world as our classroom. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, we were just recently in Guatemala for 2 months, and just traveled. And, it's one thing to look at a volcano in a book,
right?
And then another when you're standing, like a few miles away, and you can see it erupting, and you can feel the earthquake, and you can actually feel the shaking of the earth underneath. Like it's a whole different thing, when you're actually able to hold a cacao bean and then open it up and then go through the process and see how the Mayas actually produce the chocolate. Those are experiences that they'll never forget, right? And so those are things that not everybody gets to do. But once again, it's one of those dances where do you want the extra car or do we get to do this, right? And so we learned how to do that. And so I think those are major pluses.
There's a price to pay for those pluses. Absolutely. I'm sure, for sure. And that's always created with me a great interest. Julie and I almost homeschooled. But at the period in our journey when we were getting ready to, pull the ripcord. We were getting ready to jump and do it. And my nephew came against a struggle with my sister, and she was struggling, and so we took him in our home, and we went, well, we can't take on this, and homeschooling, and we were moving to a new church at the same time, and I looked at her, and she looked at me and went, we really want to do this because of these kind of benefits, but we're going, we didn't, we never did. I sometimes wish we would have. It is what it is, but that is a great plus. So what would be some of the challenges?
The opposite of all of them. No, but I actually put that like all of the above because the truth is that when you're together all the time, there is tension. Like there's a tension because you've got I don't know what it is to have a teenager, and then he doesn't know what it is to be a teenager, So you have to go through the growing pains of that in the midst of having to do, your home stuff. Plus you're educating, right? So we're doing the educating part, and so it's rough, having to deal with.
I can see that,
and sometimes it's one of those tensions where you're like, but even in those moments,
when some would go get on the bus, go to school,
exactly,
you can't do that.
No,
you don't have the 8 hours that they're normally gone,
right? Exactly, and I can't just say, I'm going to leave you here and go, because obviously there's so many littles, and so it's just like you can't do that, and so those are challenges, and I think like. As much I don't want to sound like, it's all flowers and butterflies. Once again,
it's not.
It's not. But at the same time, I realize that a lot of the pressures and a lot of the hard parts come from the outside. So, for example, when we first chose to homeschool, like all of our parents were like, "What?" Because number one, like nobody in our family homeschool.
Sure. Have you lost your mind?
Right. Plus, we're Latino. Like, you don't do that. Like, what is that?
Right.
Like, the only quick experience that Caesar had was his sister and his brother when they moved to Israel. They lived in Israel for 2 years.
Oh wow.
And so his mom homeschooled his younger sister and his brother, kind of, but mostly his sister because she was in like 7th, 8th grade, high school. And so it was a time where they kind of experienced that because of the country, because of where they were at. And so that was little, but he wasn't present in that situation, And so the only ideas that people had of homeschoolers were the low percentage of different type of personalities that they saw and characteristics that they saw. And so they looked at homeschooling through that lens and said, your kids how are you going to socialize? What are you going to do? And so a lot of that was, and still like just that is kind of like the more of the negativity that we feel is more
that
external.
Was the common thing I heard from through the years is like, how are you going to socialize these kids? Well, Lord, there's a lot of ways you can do that. What are you talking about? But that was the alarming thing. Like, you're keeping these kids in such a bubble or whatever. I'm going, no, man. There's sports and there's theater and there's co-ops that we'll talk about in all kinds of places they can get mix and mingle. Church, you got kids everywhere. Neighborhood, absolutely,
And so I think like most of it is external. Because, I was talking to the kids and I was just like, when I was in school, nobody asked my mom, what is she learning? But when you homeschool, that's a bombardment.
Oh, really?
That's a constant. If you go around and ask homeschool moms,
is that a check on you? Like, what are you teaching?
Yeah.
What are you learning?
Yeah, there's like people that'll come around homeschool moms. It's like, how do your kids learn?
Yeah.
Like, how do you know that they're learning? Like that is the question. I get interrogated. Like when I meet somebody and they know that I homeschool and I homeschool all my kids, they're like, well, how do you know that they're learning? And then how do you know that? How do they compare to other kids? And how do they socialize? Like how are you ensuring that they're getting all the things that they need and the requirements so that do you think they're gonna graduate? Are they gonna go to college? And I'm just like, wait. Like I don't ask people that when they tell me that they send their kids to school.
Right. How do you know they're going to learn?
You know what I mean? But I think that people don't realize that. It's just in society, things have shifted to where institutional education is seen as the normal, and homeschool is still not.
Really?
You know what I mean?
Still today?
I think that now it's become, now it's become more popular, right? Now it's become like more.
Did the pandemic help that?
Yeah, the pandemic helped it. A lot of people got a taste of. Well, but a lot of people got a taste of it and be like, I don't want to do this.
They were forced into it.
So a little more respect is there, and
like,
appreciation.
You're doing this. That's incredible.
You know what I mean? A little more appreciation. Because usually when you talk about, like teachers, people don't include homeschool moms in there, and so most of the time, like I had one lady tell me one time, you should have a Bible study and you should do this and you should do that and you should do that. And I was like, wait. I'm like, I homeschool my kids. And they're like, yeah, exactly. You're home all day. And I was like, So I was like, wow, you have no idea.
No, none.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of Real Life, a ministry of Hermitage Hills. If you'd like to be a part of a community seeking to follow Jesus and experience life change, visit us at hermitagehills.com/connect. You'll also find ways to ask for prayer and how to take the next steps in your faith journey. We'd love to partner with you as you grow in your faith and experience real life.